This psalm is quite famous for a song that it inspired. We know it as "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." This is the psalm that Martin Luther based this hymn on. Our translation of it is by, wait a minute, I forgot the guy's name. Thomas Carlyle made a translation of it, which is the one we're not using. We're using the other guy's translation. So I forgot his name. This is also the first psalm that John Calvin translated into the French when he translated the Bible into French. So it's an interesting psalm. Let's talk about it. Our lesson titled it "Safe and Secure." And it talks about confident trust in God even in times of trouble. It celebrates God's greatness and power over nature and his people's enemies. Derek Kidner, in his commentary, outlines it by saying, this demonstrates God's ascendancy, our power over nature, verses 1 through 3, the enemies of his city, verses 4 through 7, and over the warring world, verses 8 through 11. The headings of these psalms are always interesting to think about. The headings are not really inspired scripture, but they were added quite early to the text. But this one says it is to the chief musician, which probably means the choir leader in the temple. It is a psalm of the sons of Korah. There are approximately 11 psalms that are attributed to the sons of Korah. You see these in Psalm 42, 44, 45 through 49, 84 through 85, 87, and 88. Korah. Who is the sons of Korah? Do you know who Korah was? Korah is the leader of the Levites in Numbers 16 that wanted to be priest. And God said, no. In a very dramatic way. And then there's this phrase, a song for Alamoth. In 1 Chronicles 15:20, may indicate that is an instrument. That a certain instrument that it is to be played upon. Moth, or Almont, A-L-M-O-T instead of Alamoth, means girl. So there is a possibility that it also might mean women's voices. That it is to be sung by women. Now, that's all for what it's worth, but I always find those interesting. There's nothing in the heading or title that gives this poem a place. And what I mean by place is a time in the history of Israel or Judah. Many commentators, though, associate it with the Assyrian defeat during the reign of King Hezekiah. And and that story is found in Isaiah 37, 2 Chronicles 32, and 2 Kings 18 and 19. And the basic end of the story is that 185,000 Assyrian troops die in a single night. Judah didn't have to lift a hand. This was all done by God. And so many scholars, many commentators, like I said, point to that story and say, this is a good fit.
Paul refers to it too in Acts chapter 4.
Yeah. Okay. So this psalm may have taken place then. Another place that some commentators associate it, and I think this is in 2 Chronicles 20, the story of Jehoshaphat, and when the Jerusalem or Judah is invaded by the kings from the east, and they go out to battle, and they go out singing. So, like I said, there is no indication in the psalm itself for a time frame. In verses 1 through 3, what are the three metaphors that you see are see of God? $46. Okay. Yeah. So you have a refuge, an ever-present help in trouble, and strength as the three that are there. Does any versions that you're using have a different word in verse 7 and 11 for the word refuge? Fortress. Okay. And that's because the two words are translated refuge in most versions, but they're two different words used in the first verse and used in verses 7 and 11. Yeah. And refuge might call to mind the cities of refuge. A place of safety, a place of security, a place where you're safe from harm. In the cities of refuge, the manslaughterer could stay there and be protected from the avenger of blood. So, God is a refuge, a place of protection. And it is God Himself. It's not God and something else. It is God that is the source of protection. If we think about Jesus in these words of refuge. In Matthew 11:28, he says, "Come unto me, all ye that are labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." You may think of Hebrews verses 6:18 through 19, and I will try to pull that one up and read it. Hebrews 6:18 and 19. Talking about God, so that two unchangeable things in which it is impossible that God would prove false, we who have taken refuge might be strongly encouraged to seize the hope set before us. And then it goes on to proceed. We have this hope, a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters the inner shrine behind the curtain, where Jesus, a forerunner on our behalf, has entered, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Jesus, because we have put our trust in Him, we have taken refuge in God, brought about by Him. And then another passage along that line is found in Matthew 23, verse 37. And Jesus is speaking to Jerusalem. He said, "I would have gathered you like a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not." In other words, He would be a refuge from the storm that was coming up on Jerusalem if they had looked to Him or accepted Him as their Messiah. Okay. So strength. So refuge, in our way of thinking, is kind of external. Strength is internal. God is the source of empowerment. He is the source of which we can deal with the difficult things that we're facing. He is our source of power. Psalm 73, verse 26 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and portion forever." Uh, 28, verse 7. "The Lord is my strength and my shield. In Him my heart trusts. So I am helped, and my heart exults. And with my song I give thanks to Him. The Lord is the strength of His people. He is the saving refuge of His anointed." God is the strength to help us deal with the difficult situations, the ever-changing situations. And you pair that with a New Testament verse, Philippians 4, verse 12. Paul says, "I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. A very present help, an ever-present help in trouble. A well-proved help. He is available. He's not distant. He is present. He has promised never to leave or forsake his people. Hebrews 13:5. Now, come to this part. It starts talking about fear. Because God is your refuge, because God is your strength, because God is an ever-present source of help in times of trouble, fear should be absent, right? That's what the psalmist says. You have no reason to fear, no matter what chaos is going on around you. And the chaos that's mentioned in these verses is pretty serious chaos. The earth should change, the mountains shake, and fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Sounds like natural disasters. You can think of earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. And we all know a little bit about those in the past 20 years, and maybe even before. But even in those situations, you can have confidence in God. Now, does that mean you will escape the earthquake? That you won't be affected by it? You won't be hurt by it? No. Doesn't mean that at all. Because you've got to keep in mind the end of Hebrews chapter 11. Yeah, you got all those guys in there that escaped serious things. But then at the end of the chapter, it talks about people that did not escape. They died. But still okay. Because they trusted in God. The final outcome is they are okay. Actually, they're better than okay, but now, there's another way that you can look at this a little bit. So we referenced natural disasters, but the verse may have apocalyptic and political overtones to it. And let's see if I can show you what I mean. How is the second coming or the judgments of God described often? Yeah, let's say it. Yeah. fire, clouds, earthquakes, trumpet sound. Things moved, islands disappear. Apocalyptic, God coming in judgment. Those terms were used in the Old Testament to speak of various judgments in history. But those same words are used in passages like Luke 22 and in the Revelation to indicate that final judgment to come. So it may have apocalyptic overtones. And it may also be a reference to political chaos. Look at such passage as, and I hope I got the right one, Isaiah 17:12. Isaiah 17:12. Woe, the thunder of many peoples. They thunder like the thundering of the sea, the roar of nations. They roar like the roaring of mighty waters. When the nations roar like the roaring of mighty waters, he will rebuke them, and they will flee far away, chased like chaff on the mountains before the wind, and like whirling dust before the storm. So, sometimes the mighty waters, the sea, is a reference to nations and the tumult that political chaos brings about. Okay.
Not too much of a stretch to say that it could be alluding to the storms of life.
The storms of life. And since you brought that one up, let's think about Jesus in the storm. And we're going to use that again at the end of it if I get there. Jesus was on the boat asleep. The storm came down on the Sea of Galilee, and he spoke, and it stopped. He spoke, and it stopped. Peace, be still. The storms of life, as Roger pointed out. So we come to a second part of our psalm. Notice that little word, Selah. That may be a musical term. It may be to mean pause. And as we're reading this psalm, it would just say, stop. Think about what you just read. There are some commentators that will point out that it would have been and may have been at the end of verse 3 that the Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge, may have been once in that place, but it's not there now. Yeah, it's in 7 and 11. So, let's move on to I like the fact that we ended worship this morning with the song, The River. Think about this with the connection. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of the city, it shall not be moved. God will help it when the morning dawns. Now, can you see with morning dawn how that some commentators would associate this with the defeat of Sennacherib's army? They discovered that at the morning. Let's talk about the river. In Jerusalem, the city of God, there was actually no river as such. Babylon, Nineveh, Egypt were all founded along major rivers. These major rivers were important for their development as cities. In Jerusalem, there's no major river like that. There is the spring of Gihon. Hezekiah did some work to bring that river, or that spring of water, into Jerusalem. Now, there was probably other works before Hezekiah that did that brought water from the spring into the river, into the city. But Hezekiah did it for a specific reason. He was anticipating the invasion of the Assyrians. And if a city had water and food, they could withstand the blockade for a good while. But if you run out of food and water, guess what? You're not going to withstand the blockade for long. That part about it is found in 2 Chronicles 32:30. There's a certain part of that story that I thought was in the Bible, but it's not. Or at least I can't find it. The story is told of how that Hezekiah had two groups of, we'd call them engineers, working from two ends to build the tunnel. They're underground, and they're digging this tunnel. One's coming in one direction, one's coming in another one. But, like I said, I couldn't find that in the Bible. That's probably because I had read this from the discovery of this tunnel. There is an inscription inside the tunnel that tells how it came about. This was discovered in the 1800s, 1880, I think. This little stream may be what Isaiah was talking about in Isaiah 8. And he's talking about the people of Israel, Judah, resisting the waters of Shiloah. And now, because you have resisted the waters of Shiloah, which would be a reference to God Himself, the raging waters are going to come upon you. And that's going to be the Assyrians and the Babylonians eventually. In the city of God, there is a stream that makes glad. Now, this passage seems to anticipate something else. If you want to stop off at Ezekiel 47, in the restored temple of Ezekiel, there's a stream of water that's a trickle at the south of the temple. It's just a trickle of water. He goes out a little further. The water is ankle deep. He continues on, and the water becomes waist deep. He continues on, and the water is deep enough to swim in. But this water flows to the Arabah, to the Dead Sea area. And this is life-giving water. Life-giving water. It also anticipates Revelation 22, verse 1. Oh, and let's include that in Isaiah 47, there are fruit trees that are growing there too. And the fruit is for food, and the leaves are for the healing. Same language is used in Revelation 22, verse 1. There is a river that makes the city of God glad. Talking about Jerusalem of the time, but anticipating the new Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven, adorned as a bride. This city is secure. Notice, this city shall not be moved, because God is in the midst of it. God will help it when the morning comes. Oh, I messed up. There's some other passages about water that we need to think of. One is in John 4. Jesus, talking to the woman at the well, promises her, I will give you living water. In John 7, speaking of the Holy Spirit, Jesus says, living water shall flow out of you because you're filled with the Holy Spirit. The city is secure. It will not be moved because God is in the midst of it. Notice that in verse 6 is very much like verse 3. That the nations are in an uproar. The kingdoms totter. His voice utters, and the earth melts. You know, in Genesis, God spoke, and the world came into being. God spoke, and things appeared. God will speak again, and things disappear. the chaos returns. We might need to pause here and think about such passages as, well, that's actually with something else, but moving into the next verses, God will help it when the morning dawns. You know, significant things happened at the morning. The story of Hezekiah, the story of the Red Sea crossing, the story of Jehoshaphat, and the story of the resurrection. They were all discovered in the morning. They all occurred in the morning. God will help it when the morning dawns. It's a symbol of symbolizes a time of renewal and hope. God's timely intervention. Let's move on to, since I think we're already over time, let's move on to that come and behold the works of the Lord. And one phrase in there that I want us to point out is God is a God of peace. He brings desolations. And I'm going to mention Egypt at the Red Sea. Desolation. The 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. Desolation. Think about, and this may be a stretch for you, think about that boulder that's cut out of the mountain that crushes the statue in the book of Daniel. The kingdoms of this world are no match for that kingdom. Okay? And I'm going to mess with you a bit. Verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. We sometimes use that as a phrase for calling us to meditation. That's not really a good phrase to use that for. This is like at the Red Sea. Be still. Stop. Shut up. Stop. It's not quiet reflection. There are passages for quiet reflection and meditation. A couple of those would be Psalm 1:2, 19:15, and 77, verse 12, but not this one. This one is saying to the warring world, stop. Stop your rebellion. Submit. Jesus used words like this on the Sea of Galilee. Stop. Be quiet. And it ended. Let's think about the refrain. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, for a minute. The Lord of hosts, the Lord Almighty, the Lord are the leader of the armies. The Lord, and what'd you say? The
God of armies.
God of armies. God of armies. So, in the first thing they would think about is the God, leader of the armies of Israel. And then we think of the Revelation 19, where the rider on the white horse is leading the armies of heaven. So this is who is with them. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, our fortress. Now, some translations do something a little screwy. They change Jacob to Israel. There's probably a reason that it says Jacob. So, the God of Jacob, the covenant promise. The promises to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants. But he may use the name Jacob to say what kind of people he helps. Jacob, I don't like Jacob, and maybe he's too much like me. Jacob was a schemer. If he saw something and he wanted it, he was going for it. And it didn't matter how he got it. But God will help people like that. That's enough of my comments. So.